Michael Stone walked right past my outstretched hand like I was a piece of office furniture someone forgot to move. He was making his way down the conference table, shaking hands with everyone, flashing that practiced smile, cracking little jokes here and there. When he got to me, I still had my hand out. He looked at it, looked at me, and kept walking. Didn't even slow down when he said it. Old soldiers belong in museums, not boardrooms. I'm Richard Coleman, 49 years old, and I've been working in aerospace manufacturing for 23 years. Started right out of the Marines when I was 26, worked my way up from quality inspector to senior VP of operations. That sentence hit me harder than any physical blow I'd taken in my nearly 5 decades on this planet. A few people around the table laughed. Nervous laughs, but laughs all the same. Someone suddenly found their quarterly reports fascinating. Nobody said my name. Nobody said anything at all. Michael took his place at the head of the conference table, still standing. "Let's be efficient here," he said. "We're implementing a new leadership structure. Digital transformation requires fresh thinking." His eyes flicked toward me, cold as hell. "That means eliminating legacy positions that don't align with our innovation goals." Then, casual as ordering lunch, Richard Coleman, effective immediately. No explanation, no performance review, just scattered applause and uncomfortable silence while Jennifer Martinez from HR sat beside him with prepared paperwork already in her hands. I kept my posture straight, didn't interrupt, didn't defend myself. When guys like Michael are putting on a show of authority, fighting back just feeds their performance. He wanted a reaction. He wanted everyone in that room to see him dominate someone from the old guard. Instead, I waited until he finished his speech and turned to Jennifer, not to him. "Can you clarify something for the record?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "When exactly does this termination become legally effective?" The room went quiet. Pens stopped moving. Michael smiled, thin and impatient. "Right now." "I'll need the exact timestamp in legal language," I replied, still measured. That was the first moment his confidence wavered. Not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for me. You know how shock doesn't explode right away? It just sits there waiting. That's where I was. What stayed with me wasn't Michael's voice or his smirk. It was the 23 years he'd just erased with one sentence. The memories hit me the way they always do when someone tests what you've built. Nights staying until 2 a.m. to fix problems that would have killed production schedules. Rewriting safety protocols because someone wanted speed over accuracy. Signing off on quality standards that prevented disasters nobody ever heard about because they never happened. Those moments never came with praise. They came with paychecks and the quiet satisfaction that American manufacturing worked because people like me made sure it worked. Let me tell you about my background. I spent 8 years in the Marines from 18 to 26 before transitioning to civilian life. Did my time, learned discipline, came home and started at Coleman Aerospace as a quality inspector in 2001. The company was smaller then, maybe 400 employees, building precision parts for Boeing and some smaller defense contractors. I understood the work because I'd been on the other side. When you've maintained equipment that keeps planes in the air and soldiers alive, civilian quality control feels straightforward. Within 3 years, I was managing our entire quality assurance department. By year 7, I was VP of operations, overseeing everything from supplier relationships to final delivery. The transition from military to corporate wasn't easy. Linda Coleman, my wife of 26 years, will tell you about those first months when I'd wake up at 5 a.m. out of habit and spend an hour figuring out what to do with myself. She's the one who suggested I look into aerospace manufacturing. "You know how to make things work right," she said. "Maybe that's valuable." Turned out she was right. Michael Stone arrived after most of the foundation was already built. He inherited 23 years of steady growth and called it his strategic vision. Fresh MBA from some expensive school, clean resume at Fortune 500 companies, media-friendly talk about digital disruption. He spoke in buzzwords that meant nothing and carried himself like he'd invented the concept of leadership. But here's what Michael didn't understand about manufacturing. Relationships matter more than PowerPoint slides. Boeing doesn't care about your transformation strategy. They care about whether you deliver parts that meet specifications, on time, every single time. They care about trust built over decades of small promises kept. I'd spent 15 years building those relationships. Dave Thompson at Boeing Procurement, General Peterson in Logistics, Carol Wilson at the FAA. These weren't networking connections. They were professional partnerships based on mutual respect and proven performance. Michael saw them as inefficiencies to be streamlined. Sitting there after my dismissal, I realized something precise and uncomfortable. Michael didn't know who I was. Not really. He didn't know what I controlled, what I reviewed, or what required my signature before it became operational. He saw a salary line item, not a system. A cost center, not a control point. That wasn't just arrogance. It was negligence, dressed up as leadership. I opened my laptop more out of habit than panic. My inbox was quiet except for one email thread I hadn't looked at in months. An old confirmation dated 3 years before Michael's arrival. The subject line was unremarkable. Contract modification aerospace portfolio authorization. Inside was documentation of delegated authority tied to our Boeing and NASA contracts. Clear language, proper approvals, never rescinded. Michael's name wasn't on it. Mine was. I sat back feeling something shift in my chest. Not anger exploding, but anger focusing. 23 years of being the guy who made sure things worked, compressed into a single fact. He hadn't just underestimated me. He'd removed the one person who understood where the real authority lived. If you've spent time in the military, you understand what I mean when I say that realization didn't restore my pride. It sharpened it. I didn't rush to do anything after leaving that conference room. When you've been in combat situations, you learn to wait for the right moment. You don't react to pressure. You assess, plan, then execute. The facts lined up clean. I wasn't just a former employee. I was the authorized signatory on $95 million in active aerospace contracts. Let me explain how we got to that number. Back in 2021, Coleman Aerospace won a major contract for precision engine components across Boeing's commercial and defense lines. The deal was structured in phases: initial production, ongoing delivery, and technology upgrades over a 6-year period. Total value was $95 million spread across those years. We were in year 3 with $65 million still pending in future payments. Standard aerospace business. They pay as milestones get completed, not in lump sums. Years earlier, during complex negotiations with both Boeing and NASA, our legal team had insisted on single-point authorization. Efficiency demanded clarity, and clarity demanded one signature for contract modifications and compliance certifications. Mine. I'd reviewed every clause, every performance standard, every penalty provision in those agreements. I'd argued for language that could halt funding immediately if conduct during the contract period caused material harm to professional relationships. It wasn't dramatic language, it was practical. The clause was specific. Contracted funds may be suspended immediately upon documented evidence of behavior that undermines trust or professional standing during the performance period. No warnings, no cure period, no committee vote. The authority rested with the designated operations officer, me. Here's what Michael never bothered to learn about aerospace contracts. They're built on relationships as much as specifications. Boeing has worked with some suppliers for 40 years because trust matters when you're dealing with aviation safety. When I started at Coleman, we were just another vendor submitting bids. By my 15th year, we were a preferred partner. Dave Thompson would call me directly when they had urgent requirements. General Peterson included us in planning discussions for new aircraft programs. That level of access doesn't happen because of marketing presentations. It happens because you deliver exactly what you promise, every single time, for decades. It happens because when something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong, you fix it quietly without making it their problem. Michael saw those relationships as old-fashioned. Too much face-to-face time, not enough automation, he'd say in strategy meetings. He wanted to digitize the human element out of the process. What he didn't understand was that those relationships were the foundation everything else was built on. I confirmed the contract language one more time, reading slowly without emotion. Michael Stone had never seen these appendices. He treated contract details like administrative noise, trusting summaries and delegating fine print to people like me, people he now considered obsolete. I checked the company's recording policy next. Every executive meeting was captured automatically, archived for legal protection and governance review. Standard corporate practice that Michael knew about but clearly hadn't considered the implications of. The handshake refusal, his dismissive words, the public humiliation. Every second preserved in HD quality with multiple camera angles because our conference room was set up for client video calls. Michael's casual cruelty, the way he'd enjoyed embarrassing someone in front of 12 other executives. All of it recorded, time-stamped, and stored on servers I still had access to as senior VP until my termination became official at midnight. I documented everything methodically, exact timestamps, participant list, specific language used. Saved the file with a clear label and closed my laptop. Nothing impulsive had happened. Nothing emotional was required. Michael thought authority was something you projected through confidence and MBA credentials. I knew it was something you exercised through proper channels and documented procedures. When I stood up that evening, my hands were steady. The system was already in motion. I just hadn't activated it yet. I drove home through familiar neighborhoods, thinking about what Linda would say. She'd been through enough military deployments to recognize when I was in operational mode, quiet, focused, working through a problem systematically. Our house sits on an acre outside town, nothing fancy, just a 1990s colonial with a decent yard and enough space for grandchildren to visit. Linda was in the kitchen when I walked in, starting dinner like any other Wednesday. "How was your day?" she asked, not looking up from the stove. "Interesting," I said. "Michael Stone fired me." That got her attention. She set down the wooden spoon and turned around. "Fired you for what?" "For being old, apparently. Called me a museum piece in front of the whole executive team. Linda has known me for 28 years, married for 26 of them. She's seen me come home from difficult deployments, from contract negotiations that went sideways, from board meetings that tested my patience. She knows when I'm angry and when I'm planning. This was planning." "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I'm going to remind him that experience has value," I said, "and that contracts have consequences when you know how to use them." She nodded once, understanding passing between us without explanation needed. "When?" she asked. "Friday. Give him a few days to feel comfortable with his decision." We ate dinner in comfortable silence. Linda didn't ask for details because she knew I'd tell her when I was ready. After 26 years of marriage, some conversations happen without words. She knew I wasn't planning anything emotional or vindictive. I was planning something methodical and professional. That evening, I sat in my home office and made a timeline. Michael's public humiliation on Wednesday. 3 days for him to think he'd won. 3 days for him to start implementing his digital transformation without the old soldier getting in the way. 3 days for $65 million to become very vulnerable. I reviewed my contact list. Dave Thompson at Boeing Procurement, Carol Wilson at the FAA, General Peterson in logistics. All the relationships Michael considered inefficient. All the people who trusted my judgment over flashy presentations. Thursday passed quietly. I puttered around the house, fixed a leaky faucet, worked in the garden. Linda and I went to dinner at our usual place. The Mexican restaurant where we'd been going for 15 years, where the waitress knows our order before we sit down. Normal life continuing while I planned Michael Stone's professional downfall. Friday morning came like any other day. I woke up at 5:30 without an alarm. Old habits from military life. Linda was still sleeping, so I made coffee quietly and sat in my home office with the morning paper. Same routine I'd followed for 15 years. Except today was different. Today, I was going to make a phone call that would cost Michael Stone more money than most people see in a lifetime. I reviewed the contract language one final time. Everything aligned perfectly. Authority, scope, trigger conditions. Nothing subjective, nothing personal, just business executed according to terms both parties had agreed to. At 8 a.m. sharp, I picked up my phone and dialed Dave Thompson at Boeing Procurement. Thompson speaking. "Dave, this is Richard Coleman at Coleman Aerospace. I need to invoke immediate contract suspension under Section 7B, documented professional conduct violation." There was a pause. Professional. Brief. No surprise on his end. We'd worked together for 18 years. He understood I wouldn't make this call unless the situation was serious. "Understood, Richard. What's the nature of the violation?" "Public humiliation of designated contract officer during recorded executive session. Behavior undermining professional relationships and trust protocols. Do you have documentation, full video and audio recording, multiple witnesses, time-stamped evidence?" Another pause. Longer this time. Dave knew what this meant. We both did. "Richard, you understand what you're requesting? This suspends $65 million in pending payments pending investigation." "I understand completely, Dave. The conduct was egregious and publicly witnessed. It violates every professional standard we've built our partnership on. Timeline for paperwork? Immediate implementation. The violation occurred 3 days ago, allowing adequate time for internal resolution. None was provided. Roger that. Suspension effective immediately. You'll have formal notification within the hour." The conversation lasted 4 minutes. No drama, no explanations, no debate. Military efficiency applied to corporate contracts. I set the phone down and went to join Linda for breakfast. Somewhere across town, automated systems were already processing the suspension. Notifications generating, balances freezing, dependencies being identified. Michael Stone was about to learn that the old soldier he dismissed understood modern business better than he'd imagined. The call came to Michael at 10:22 a.m. I wasn't there to see his face, but I could picture the progression. Confusion first. Surely this was some administrative error. Then disbelief as the numbers became clear. Then the slow, horrible realization that $65 million had just evaporated from the company's future revenue. By 11 a.m., his calendar had started clearing itself as meetings got canceled without explanation. Legal convened an emergency session. Finance stopped sending routine reports and started requesting confirmations for things that should have been automatic. Timothy Roberts from accounting called me at 11:45. Former Navy, 15 years with Coleman. "Richard, what just happened? Finance is going crazy. Something about the Boeing contracts." "Michael made some poor decisions," I said. "The consequences are becoming apparent." "Good," Timothy said. "What he did to you was wrong. Half the company is talking about it." That was news to me. I thought the humiliation had been contained to the executive conference room. "Word got around," Timothy continued. "Jennifer Martinez told her assistant, who told everyone in accounting. By Thursday afternoon, the whole building knew what happened. People are angry, Richard. You're respected here." I felt something loosen in my chest, not vindication exactly, more like confirmation that I hadn't been wrong about basic human decency. By noon, understanding had arrived. Then he got it. This wasn't a mistake or a technical glitch. It was deliberate, executed through proper channels by someone who understood the system better than he did. The market responded before Michael could craft a public statement. Coleman Aerospace stock dropped 15% in trading as analysts connected dots faster than executives could respond. When confidence disappears that quickly, explanations become irrelevant. People began watching Michael differently, not with hostility, but with calculation. He'd entered the week as a decision maker. By Friday afternoon, he was a variable in someone else's equation. The call to me came at 2:15 p.m. Michael's voice was controlled, almost friendly, like we were old colleagues discussing a minor misunderstanding. "Richard, we need to talk." He started with incentives, consulting packages, transition bonuses, public acknowledgement of my contributions. "We moved too fast," he said, offering practiced humility layered over obvious urgency. I let him finish. When he paused, I asked him to put his offer in writing. He didn't like that. The tone shifted. "You can't just pull funding like that. There are consequences for the whole company." I responded with contract sections, clause numbers, and exact language he'd never bothered to read. Section 7B, Paragraph 3, Professional Conduct Standards for Authorized Officers. You violated it publicly and deliberately. Silence. Then he tried again, louder this time. "You've damaged the company's reputation. This makes us all look unprofessional." I corrected him quietly. "The recording shows you damaging your own reputation. I just enforced the consequences." That's when he stopped pretending diplomacy would work. He blamed market conditions, blamed Boeing's outdated processes, blamed everything except his own judgment. If you hadn't overreacted to a simple management decision, none of this would have happened. I didn't interrupt his list of excuses. When he finished, I said calmly, "Your conduct triggered the clause. Nothing else." He went quiet, not reflective, calculating. "What will it take to fix this?" "There's nothing to fix. The process executed correctly." He exhaled, sharp and frustrated. "You planned this whole thing." I answered honestly, "I prepared for it. There's a difference." The call ended without resolution. Within an hour, my phone started buzzing with messages from board members requesting context, legal asking for documentation. But the questions weren't about contract interpretation anymore. They were about Michael's judgment, about the recorded meeting, about why no one had intervened when he'd publicly humiliated a 23-year veteran. By 4 p.m., Charles Wilson, the board chairman, had called an emergency session for Monday morning. Michael wasn't invited to attend. That told me everything I needed to know about where this was heading. Linda found me in the garden that evening, pulling weeds from around the tomatoes. She didn't say anything. just handed me a beer and sat down on the bench we'd built together 10 years ago. "How do you feel?" she asked finally. "Tired," I said, "but not angry anymore." "Good. Anger's no way to live." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set behind the oak trees we'd planted when we first moved here. 26 years of marriage, and she still knew exactly what I needed without asking. "What happens Monday?" she asked. "I think they're going to offer me Michael's job. Will you take it?" I looked at our garden, at the house we'd built into a home, at the woman who'd stood by me through deployments and career changes and everything else life had thrown at us. "No," I said. "I think I'm done with corporate politics." She smiled. "Good. You deserve better than cleaning up someone else's mess." That night, I slept better than I had in months. Monday morning, I drove to the office for what I knew would be my final meeting there. The same conference room where Michael had dismissed me now felt different, smaller, somehow less important. Charles Wilson sat at the head of the table with two other directors, Patricia Stevens from Audit and William Anderson from Legal. Jennifer Martinez from HR was notably absent. That absence spoke volumes. "Richard, thank you for coming in," Charles said without preamble. "We've reviewed the recording from Wednesday's meeting. We need to discuss what happened and where we go from here." I'd known Charles for 12 years, served on strategic planning committees with him. Former Air Force himself, though he'd transitioned to finance instead of manufacturing. We understood each other. "Before we begin," he continued, "I want you to know that Michael Stone has been removed as CEO effective this morning." I kept my expression neutral, but something settled in my chest. Not satisfaction exactly, more like a puzzle piece clicking into place. "The board watched the recording 3 times, Patricia Stevens added. "What we saw was unacceptable by any professional standard. The public humiliation, the dismissive language, the complete disregard for your contributions." William Anderson leaned forward. From a legal perspective, his conduct created significant liability exposure. The contract suspension was entirely justified under the circumstances. Charles studied my face for reaction. When none came, he continued, "We're prepared to offer you Michael's position on an interim basis while we conduct a proper CEO search, full executive compensation, complete operational authority, public restoration of your reputation." The offer was substantial. More money than I'd ever made. Corner office, company car, stock options. Everything Michael had possessed now being offered to the man he'd thrown away. I listened to every detail, without interrupting. When Charles finished, there was expectant silence. 3 successful executives waiting for me to jump at vindication. "I appreciate the offer," I said finally, "but I'm going to decline." Charles blinked. "Richard, you've earned this. What happened was wrong, and this is our way of making it right, which is exactly why I won't be coming back." I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 49 years in my knees and back. "Gentlemen, I spent 23 years making this company work. I'm not interested in spending whatever time I have left fixing what someone else broke." Patricia Stevens spoke up. "What will you do?" "Something that matters," I said. "Something built on respect instead of cleanup." The drive home was quiet. Linda was waiting in the kitchen with fresh coffee and a knowing smile. "How did it go?" she asked. "Just like we talked about. I'm officially retired." She nodded, unsurprised. We'd discussed this possibility over the weekend. Linda had been through enough career transitions to understand when it was time to move to the next chapter. "So what's the plan?" she asked. "Remember Timothy Roberts from accounting? The Navy guy? He called me Saturday. Says there's real opportunity in helping veteran-owned businesses navigate aerospace contracts. Apparently word's gotten around about what happened here." Linda smiled. "The network strikes again." That afternoon, I started making calls to old military contacts who'd transitioned into civilian consulting. By the end of the week, I had the framework for Coleman Strategic Consulting, focused on helping veteran-owned businesses navigate government and aerospace procurement. The work isn't glamorous. It's methodical, respectful, and profitable. My clients understand the value of experience because they've earned it themselves. When I explain contract language, they listen. When I suggest relationship-building strategies, they follow through. No one calls me a museum piece or suggests I'm dead weight. They call me when they need results. 3 months later, I was in my new office. A small suite in a converted warehouse that houses 8 veteran-owned businesses when Timothy Roberts called. Richard, thought you'd want to know. Michael Stone landed somewhere new. Good for him, I said, meaning it. Everyone deserves a second chance. Yeah, well, might not be so good. He's trying to implement the same digital transformation strategy. Word is his new board is already asking questions about his previous experience. I didn't ask for details. Michael Stone was no longer my problem to solve or my victory to celebrate. How are things at Coleman? I asked instead. Better. Charles Wilson took over as interim CEO. They brought in someone from outside for the permanent position, someone who actually understands aerospace manufacturing. Boeing renewed our contracts last month. That made me smile. Coleman Aerospace would survive and probably thrive under leadership that understood what it took to maintain those critical relationships. And Richard, Timothy added, thanks for standing up to him. It meant something to all of us. These days, I wake up without an alarm, spend mornings with my grandson when our daughter visits from Denver, work with clients who appreciate what I bring to the table instead of tolerating it. Last week, I helped a Marine-owned precision machining company win their first major aerospace contract worth $18 million over 4 years. When they got the confirmation call, the owner, a former gunnery sergeant named Torres, actually teared up. This changes everything for my family, he told me. That's the work that matters now, not ego or vindication, just helping people who've served their country continue serving in civilian life. Linda and I are planning a cross-country drive this fall, visiting national parks we never had time to see during the busy years. Taking our time, stopping wherever looks interesting. Our grandson wants to come along for part of it. He's 16 now, thinking about engineering school. Last weekend I showed him how to read blueprint specifications in my workshop. He picked it up fast. Grandpa, he said, why didn't you stay and run that company? You could have shown them how it's really done. I thought about that for a minute. Sometimes, kiddo, the best way to win is knowing when to walk away. Real success isn't about getting even with people who don't respect you. It's about finding people who do. The lesson wasn't about revenge or justice. It was about understanding your worth and protecting it quietly, professionally, and completely. Real authority doesn't announce itself with buzzwords or corner offices. It executes when necessary, then moves on to more important things. Michael Stone taught me that dignity isn't something you demand in the moment. It's something you build into your work long before anyone tests it. I'm grateful for the lesson, even if I wouldn't recommend his teaching methods. Sometimes the greatest victory is walking away with your integrity intact, knowing you've built something better while the people who underestimated you are still trying to figure out what went wrong. Real power isn't about getting even. It's about building something that lasts. The most dangerous enemy of arrogance isn't anger. It's competence paired with patience. Because while anger burns out quickly, competence endures and strikes exactly when it matters most. True victory isn't measured by how completely you destroy your opponent, but by how successfully you build something better while they're still figuring out what went wrong.